Hello friends, Sleepy Cat here. Today I'm making a bit of a different video on Hero Siege. Normally I go over concepts, short guides, tips, and things to help newer players or answer questions I see often in my stream chat. However, I want to take some time to talk in detail about the new season and the game. My perspective on Hero Siege is going to be a bit different due to the fact that I only started playing at the end of Season 4. Meaning my playtime on this game consists of Season 4.5 and Season 6. I skipped Season 5 as it was too close to the launch of Path of Exile 2, which is where I somewhat regrettably spent all my time. Though playtime-wise, you could definitely say I'm someone who puts a lot of time into this game when he does play it. My perspective may be limited to what I've experienced thus far, but I think it still has enough value to get some feelings out there for the public. So today, let's talk about Hero Siege, and I want to start with the new season, Season 6. I'm going to go over things I like and don't like, probably in a not so particular order. Season 6 brought on a lot of changes to the game, including a new difficulty mode to reach beyond Hell 5, Inferno. Several mechanical changes, class changes, new items. It's the typical new ARPG season to give a fresh life into a game. Now, how did that go? Well, let's talk about the server issues. Well, if you played on the launch of Season 6, you're familiar with the term Sync Siege. You probably, like many of us, spent most of your time staring at syncing messages while changing zones, if you could even log into the game at all, or join a game, or stay in the game. Server issues abound were something that happened, and from what I'm told, tend to happen a lot with those launches. This one, however, was a bit special, as this season they broke concurrent player records consistently for even after their initial launch. Something kind of crazy for a game that has a relatively small fan base. The unfortunate part being was the servers couldn't handle the load of the first few days, resulting in a rather frustrating gameplay loop where every zone swap could be your last. The amount of players meant everyone's least favorite thing in a new game they want to play: queues. So to make matters worse, if you did crash out to the sync screen, or the game just crashed, which tended to happen often to people, especially if you played with others, you then had a forced 10-minute to 2-hour vacation depending on the time of day. These issues luckily don't seem to have too negatively impacted the success of this season, which I'm very happy about. Server issues can often be hard to predict or mitigate, especially for a smaller company that is experiencing a rather sudden and surprising upsurge in players, though there is something to be said about understanding your potential market share of player attention when launching a new game. Season 6 launched at a great time where there's a genuine lull in good ARPG content out there, and several prominent content creators, especially those from the Path of Exile space, have talked about playing the game and have done so in the past. Hero Siege just seemed like a hidden gem to me, as when I play it, hours of my life tend to vanish from existence, all for the sweet dopamine of a heroic or angelic drop noise to hit my ears. This game is easily one of my favorite ARPGs, if not my favorite, right next to Path of Exile 1, so I'm glad it's getting the success it deserves. I just hope in the Season 7 launch we can mitigate these server issues, because I guarantee you there's going to be even more players wanting to log in than ever before. Server issues aside, let's talk about the actual season itself, starting with Inferno Difficulty. I think Inferno Difficulty is a really cool idea. The game has had Hell 5 difficulty for a little while, and a step up with more magic find and more challenging monsters and even special Inferno-only boss drops is awesome. People tend to get to a point where they get bored of the same gameplay loop and reaching the same level of power with nothing left to conquer or do with it, so adding an additional difficulty that's a step up is always a solid choice. Diablo 4 could learn a lot from this, as they've basically added nothing to the game except bosses we already fought in the campaign for the last 3 seasons. This difficulty, also having added rewards, is something that entices players, and is always what I feel should be a requirement when progressing in an ARPG. I feel that you should always be able to do more difficult content for a greater reward to push builds and incentivize making your character stronger and faster. Inferno is an awesome concept, but getting there is the problem. At its core, it seems reasonable. Getting to Inferno requires getting to Hell 5 and killing the top 2 bosses in the game, Amun-Ra and Gabriel, on Hell 5 difficulty. Sure, that sounds fine. It's the hardest content in Hell 5, why not? Well, the problem here is multifaceted. You see, to fight these 2 bosses is in itself an intensely long grind, Amun-Ra a little less so. But Gabriel, due to the drop rates of not only the materials to fight the bosses to get the souls to make the item to summon him, but also the drop rates of the souls themselves when you even get to those bosses. This itself creates a really weird gameplay loop, and I'm sorry SSF gamers, I'm going to talk about this from a perspective of trade. I know how awful this is in SSF, but trade is what I play. Trust me when I have sympathies for you, and everything I'm going to mention, know that I understand you have this worse than the gold-loving market enjoyers that I'm about to reference. The problem with this is the loop it creates for the game. You see, to get to these bosses is such a massive undertaking for a pretty substantial reward that the cost and value of the items required skyrockets. Not only that, but the bosses themselves that you need to kill to unlock Inferno drop some really valuable items as well, so the cost can be ever increasing. Now let's look at it even deeper than just Amun-Ra and Gabriel and what they drop, but also the fact that Inferno bosses drop some of the top tier items in the game. Rimskin Assassin Gloves from Luna, Eternal War Girdle from Sung Lee, and Torch of Shadows, one of the staple items in literally every build in the game is now locked behind Inferno on Uber Reaper. Torch being an item that was instrumental in helping with late game resistance issues that have now been made worse by the nerf to runes. So now that these are Inferno only and Inferno is locked behind Amun-Ra Gabriel, the value of all these items goes up massively, which wouldn't be a problem if they weren't so rare. Boss parts prior to the patch, a week or two in, were so exceedingly rare that Uber Damien's Soul of Anguish was hovering around 40 to 60 million gold at any given time of the day. Corruptions and Despairs were hovering in the 6 to 20 million range as well. The cost of fighting Gabriel was over 200 million gold, and at the time in the economy, that was nearly the cost of a full build that could obliterate the bosses themselves, meaning that by the time you could afford to fight them, you were likely to kill them before their mechanics even happened, and then obliterate everything in Inferno as well with no issue. Even taking gold value out of the equation, the time investment alone to get there is insane. It took me as a relatively inexperienced player who mostly played in Season 4.5 over 100 hours of gameplay to reach Inferno. This was with one of the most powerful classes in the game and utilizing Goblin Codex farming techniques to make crazy gold early on before this method was popularized. I bought the summon items to go into Inferno after I got frustrated just farming the materials myself. Then I proceeded to absolutely obliterate the bosses and to farm Inferno bosses for nearly 6 to 8 billion gold of profit in items that I sold before moving on to blood packs. Like I said, this is a multifaceted problem, and I'm sure we'll see resolution to it in the future as they're very aware of it. The issues are all over the place. Battle fragments for Sung Li drop so infrequently from Eternal Battlefields that they are now the most valuable thing on trade, especially as the player count dwindles and less people are finding and selling them. The boss parts for Damien got a significant buff, but it's still a lot of parts for a small chance at a soul. Even Reaper is a slog of a task because he now costs 40 dimensional shards per kill. There's a few problems I have with this. The main one being I think the bosses themselves should be the challenge to reach Inferno. Otherwise, why even have them be the requirement? I think you shouldn't spend more time farming for their keys than actually making your character strong enough to defeat them, especially in Trade League where you're deciding if your currency goes into your gear or a Gabriel key. That just isn't satisfying and is genuinely frustrating to a lot of people. Combine this with the fact that you get a single attempt. So if you aren't prepared, you make a mistake, or are newer to the game, or a weaker class that can't skip mechanics, well, have fun farming or paying for another key. And you can't get carried easily because everyone entering the fight needs their own key, which is fine because if everyone could go in on one key, the economic value of the items would plummet. The unlock is also even worse of an economic problem because the materials themselves and the number needed to fight the prerequisite bosses that drop the souls is the same on Hell 5 and Inferno. Meaning that the more people that reach Inferno, the more gated the cost of entering can become, because Inferno players will buy up all the material and Bifrost keys in order to farm bosses, as the Inferno-only boss drops are so profitable and good. This creates artificial gatekeeping to Inferno difficulty just to the economic gain of being there and farming these items, further increasing the gap between these players as time goes on. So what is the solution? Well, there's a few. The easy, potentially not so good option is revert the drop changes, make the drop rates back to what they were like in Season 4.5 and allow easier access to the bosses. Yes, this lowers the economic value of items, but it makes it more accessible to everyone. You could go as far as separating material type and the cost of Hell 5 versus Inferno, making Inferno bosses cost more, but that just still messes with the economic value. You could also add new material requirements to the fight for Inferno bosses, but economically that can cause issues for the base materials and also may not be a technically ideal solution. There's also the option of making Amun-Ra and Gabriel fights have an Inferno-specific entry version in Hell 5, where you don't get their normal loot pool, but they only cost a fraction of their current summon materials. Even tying it directly to a quest that makes you do all of the endgame activities in Hell 5 successfully, including the Uber bosses, and then gives you free access to a version of them that just drops a heroic. There's a lot of solutions to this. I'm not sure which one would be the best, but we definitely need some sort of change to getting to Inferno, as this is currently a grueling task that is also character specific, meaning you eat the time and cost if you make another character, which in SSF, if you're playing something with bad boss damage, you're having a bad time. Like I said, the challenge of it should be the bosses themselves, so if you can fight them earlier, you then need to be more worried about your gear and player power than about farming Sung Li 70 times for 1/3 of your goddamn Gabriel key. Yes, I know there are glyphs for battlefields and for Shadow Realms and for boss part drops, but I don't feel like that's an answer here to this problem. The time investment is just too deep. I think we'll see some changes to the Inferno unlock, and I'll be happy for it, as its current state has many players feeling like there's just part of the game they cannot access without so much monumental effort that it becomes unfun or tedious. So now that Inferno's out of the way, let's talk about another thing we got with Season 6. And for our second topic, we're talking about blood packs. Blood packs may be the best thing this game has ever added to its player base. Blood packs are essentially a private season for 10 to 30 players to play Hero Siege together, isolated from trade in a group self-found setting. And the best part being they can custom tune several modifiers like experience, mob pack density, heroic and angelic drop chance, drop rates on runes, boss parts, spawn rates of battlefields, rifts, and towers, even how much materials you need to fight Reaper and Sung Li. Blood packs are genius. Not only are they financially great for the company, but for the players' enjoyment themselves. They're a fun, engaging manner in which to play Hero Siege. They remove the pressure of playing on the trade market and the gold value of items, while also allowing you to still play with a small or large group of friends and maintain a multiplayer feel. The value of items themselves changes to what people in your pact can use, and allows you to enjoy a group experience in a version of the game that you can customize to be easier or harder at your own discretion. This is where I went after a week of playing trade, largely due to trade inflation and just being bored with farming endless amounts of gold, but also because the community in my stream really wanted it. We dubbed it the Paw Pact, as I'm a cat, and everyone has loved it so far. Since then, I have opened 7 blood packs, which I've been happy to front the money for when needed. Blood packs create several things that are good for Hero Siege. 1, a new revenue stream for the company, allowing them to expand current staff, infrastructure, and put more into the game's development and life cycle in the future. 2, player agency and fun. It creates a realm in which people can engage with the game in an elevated manner of ease or difficulty that they choose, and to do it with friends if they want. You could in theory play a blood pact solo instead of with 29 other people. Never found an angelic before? Crank up those rates and farm. You'll get one a lot faster here. It's just a good time. 3, longevity of the game. The natural cycle of ARPG seasons is that the player count dwindles. With this comes less people to play with, attrition of the game and mechanics, as well as the trade economy slowly becoming worse for people to enter due to the inflation or scarcity of items. With blood packs, people are allowed an alternative way to play the game longer, isolated from the trade economy and still with other people. Also, it's a unique game mode with modifiable styles that allow a different experience per pack. Overall, I think this is one of the most successful and well-loved mechanics they could have added into the game. Yes, it costs money. Yes, it's only 15 days for that money, but I'm someone who very much measures the hours they put into something for the money they spend. When I consider that for 25 USD, I can get 15 days of however many hours I want of gameplay for myself and 29 other people, the money isn't even a concept. That's why I've opened 7 packs so far. I'd open more as well if opening them was a little easier to do. So with that out of the way and my absolute glazing of this awesome mechanic, let's talk about issues and things I'd like to see for Season 7. We've already gotten some tentative patch notes and changes for Season 7 involving blood packs, so I'll try to avoid talking about those changes as they seem to already be solved. Most of them are just modifiers and sliders, which I'm 100% in favor of. More customization is amazing and always a good thing. There are many things we experienced that we wanted to be able to have sliders and options to change, and it looks like they're potentially going to add those things. So here's what I want to see for blood packs in the future. First, the most important and biggest ask, larger blood packs. I would have gladly paid 3 to 5 times the price to fit more people into my initial blood pack. Capped at 30 was a problem for me with a community of 100 plus people that wanted to play. The signups for my pack hit 85 on the first day and received over 200 by this date. I know this may be a technical limitation, and if you aren't a streamer like myself, you may not have such a large group, but I think it would be incredible to have a 100-person blood pact if possible, or even larger. Being able to fit that many people, or for me, more than that, wink wink, 300-person pact win, would be awesome. I'm going to be on my paws and knees begging for this in Season 7, the single most significant change I can hope for at this point. Other than increasing the cap, let's talk about the chat. Early blood packs don't have their own chat, so you don't see global, heroic, and angelic drops for your pack, just for the chat channel you're in. And even then, blood pack drops don't announce, so to even talk to each other, you need to all be in the same chat region, which you share with other people, and to see drops, you'd have to be in the same game. This being solved would be incredible. One of my favorite parts of Hero Siege is seeing people get good drops, especially my friends and my community. This being visible in a pact and having pact-specific chat would be a massive upgrade. Once again, I'm not sure the technical limitations on this, but I think it's necessary for the evolution of this mechanic. Next up is the stash, probably one of the more difficult things to solve. I think it needs more tabs for sure, but the biggest problem is only one person can use it at a time. If you increase blood pack size, you run a further risk that there's someone jorking in the stash when you go to dump off your heroic items for your friends. God forbid someone just leaves it open and walks away from their computer for the night. This limitation, I'm not sure if it can be solved, simply because of how stashes may be coded in the game. The guild stash has been like this for a while. My crackpot solution is to add a trade market to the pack that has no cost for posting or buying items, and you just dump everything into the trade market, allowing people in your pack to freely grab it and view it without a player limit. But once again, technical limitation on this may be too intense, as I know markets essentially run off their server. I just want to be able to drop things in the damn stash. Please God, close the stash when you're done with it. I'm begging you. In the scope of later seasons, I'd love to see some new evolved ideas for what can be done. Maybe some cool challenge options other than just numerical changes, like boss rush modes, multiple bosses, different starting locations, just spitball ideas of things that could be fun. There's plenty of ways to create new and exciting options for a blood pack for people like myself to run events, or even friend groups to just experience new things. At the end of the day, this may be my favorite mechanic in Hero Siege and will probably keep me coming back all the way until Season 7 launch. So now let's talk about something a little more on the critical side. I glazed the game and the decisions, and now I'm going to go back to critiquing some of the things that I would like to see improved. improved. I'll talk as much as I can with limited knowledge and keep it relatively measured. Class balance. This is a severe issue, and it's one that no ARPG solves perfectly. None of them can really get this right, but I think it needs special mention in a game like this where there's so many different classes and they are locked to their own set of abilities. This creates a situation where some classes are just definitively worse than others, especially when you add an Inferno difficulty as a mechanic, which requires killing 2 difficult bosses, one of which has a very specific AoE DPS check that you need to meet or you just can't win. Now, don't get me wrong, before people come out of the woodwork going, actually, X class is fine, I do X damage with it and I am an Inferno. Yes, I know, everything is possible. That's the best feature of Hero Siege, is the gear can push any class to a really good level of power. The problem is in the progression of the classes and the time or economic investment in gear to get them there. If you're one of the people that thinks this is fine, please tell me the gear required for a Stormweaver to kill Amun-Ra in less than 20 minutes versus a Lancer's gear to kill Amun-Ra in 20 seconds. Cost-wise, it's ridiculous. These are simple balancing issues, and Stormweaver, if it had good bossing, would be the best class in the game due to its insane AoE clear of content and its built-in teleport and faster cast rate. However, I think there's some serious issues with class balance and scaling and how fast some classes are capable of things in the game at spikes and peaks of power. There are far too many classes that just get hard-walled in early hell difficulties from progressing until they buckle down and farm up significant amounts of gear, while others can throw on a paper bag and pick up a paper towel roll and stroll into Hell 5 for free. Now, I don't think the classes that can obliterate Hell 5 easily with small investment should be nerfed. Things like HP Stack Necro, HP Stack Plague Doctor, Poison Plague Doctor, Lancer, Samurai. These classes are fine. Maybe not Lancer single target, but I don't have a problem with what they're capable of in a bubble. It's when you look at the other classes struggling that it becomes an issue. To be fair, another great part of Hero Siege is that all classes do things differently at different levels of expertise and power. And asked what's the best class, I just ask what do you want to do and how, because my answer will change depending on yours. My genuine hope is that top tier classes right now only receive minor tuning, while the underrepresented classes receive significant buffs to allow more build and class diversity. I don't want another season of only Plague Doctors and Stormweavers on my lobby screen. This problem isn't nearly as bad as it may sound when I'm describing it, but for new players coming in, I'd like them to feel a bit more options when choosing a class, because right now it's hard to recommend some classes when people ask about reaching the top end of the game. It makes the new player experience really difficult when some of those classes are locked behind a paywall. Overall, I'd just like to see a level of class balance where everyone progresses relatively at the same rate. I know that's nearly unattainable, but I definitely feel some classes are at a point where it's really hard to suggest them to anyone asking, or when people come in and say they're playing them, there's a tension in the air saying, maybe you shouldn't do that. Once again, I know, all classes are fine. You just have to have all the gear, but that's not always super attainable for everybody, and most of the people I talk to end up being new players. Speaking of which, let's talk about new player experience. And this may be the area where I lose some of you veteran players, and I'm sorry if my opinion about the game differs from yours, but I think new player experience is something that is very important, especially if you want to see the game you love grow, prosper, and become better. I'm not saying put yellow paint all over interactable objects like all these shitty AAA games out there, but I am saying the game in its current implementation is not very new player friendly. This is not only because of the lack of in-game information, but also because the way the game scales as you progress through normal. It feels very bad if you're new. I received multiple comments from people stating the game feels extremely punishing and difficult as they level up through normal with no guidance, which in my opinion should be significantly less challenging than when you get to Nightmare or Hell. I think beyond just some small scaling issues with how much damage monsters do, how hard it is to build early defensive layers, and how little information exists in the game, the fact that a lot of player power and skill power in general is locked behind the level 60 sub-skill key points is a large issue. Some skills are really missing the oomph that makes them feel genuinely good. I think the suggestion I have here, which may not be agreed upon by many people, is that you lower the damage on those skills, or at least the ones that their modifiers give, but let us get them earlier. Maybe level 30, 35, or 40. Give us the power earlier so we can feel out a class sooner and enjoy it for longer. This would help newer players and veteran players enjoy a class sooner as they progress through normal, instead of having to wait until the early beginning of Nightmare to hit level 60 to actually feel like they're doing something. I do understand that some of these abilities make people literally fly through the rest of the game and are the power spike they need to actually feel alive, but we could tone them down just enough to where that power spike comes a little later. New player experience comes down to a lot of things, and I've made most of my videos based on that, because a lot of people discovered Hero Siege for the first time and expressed to me how lost they feel. Some people didn't know mercenaries or companions existed, and they were already in Hell 5 and level 100 farming for gear and trying to get to Inferno. A lot of things just aren't spelled out, and I think there should be a serious discussion about how to make a game a little more friendly on the initial impression so you don't lose any of your potential market. Path of Exile 1 is a game that is very unapologetic and basically pushes you to go find a build guide or you'll suffer on your first playthrough, while Hero Siege does not feel like that at all because it has way less complex mechanics and no crazy gigantic skill tree. I think some level of helping people understand mechanics and where to find them is always good. Something as simple as little side quests that tell you, hey, go hire a mercenary, or hey, did you know you have a companion? Just little things to guide people in the right direction. And overall, I do genuinely think that monster damage scales a little too quickly as you're going through normal. The lack of defensives that you have at that point, unless you're picking up literally every item and examining it, which slows the entire gameplay process down, just doesn't feel feel easy to acquire. Unless you're an extreme veteran player with wealth of knowledge and experience, you're not going to have a good time going through on your first couple trips. You're going to die a lot, and that becomes frustrating, and not everyone is cut out for that many deaths. Though the lack of these things has made my videos very popular, so maybe I'm working against my own self-interest here. I just want to see the game thrive and new players to have a good time. Overall, Season 6 has been a blast, and as a streamer and YouTuber, I've grown so massively off it beyond where I used to be, it's genuinely overwhelming. When I started streaming Hero Siege the week before Season 6 launch, I had 105 followers and an average of 8 to 10 viewers, most of which were my friends and some very kind returning long-time people. I've only streamed since October 2024. Hero Siege blew up my average of 70 to 150 viewers and over 1,000 followers, and I got to accomplish that playing one of my favorite games of all time. I'm eternally grateful that the game exists, and to all the people that choose to spend their valuable time watching my videos and hanging out in my stream, giving me the best gaming experience I've ever had. I only see good things for Hero Siege moving forward, and am more than happy to be involved in the way that I am, as someone who can help players and just create an environment they can chill in and have fun. I'll be making plenty of Hero Siege content in the future, and I'm sure you'll hear plenty of my opinions on this game going forward if you enjoy listening to me talk. Here's looking forward to Season 7 and all the fun it might bring. It's going to be a blast. Thank you as always for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day. I'm Sleepy Cat, and I'm tired. Good night.